We are here back with Nina Lopatina. Welcome from Contextual.
Thanks.
We're going to talk about the state of context engineering in general. But one thing I wanted to also give people a sense who are not here of the NeurIPS flavor discussion and all that. We were talking about, like, I was asking you which are the best NeurIPS after parties. You said McCore. And what's the other one?
Turing and NVIDIA.
Turing and NVIDIA, where there was a really good fireside chat discussion, which is rare because I often tend to shy away from fireside chats. But apparently the guest was Yejin Choi, who is a very well-known figure on these parts. What was it about?
Yeah, it was about kind of the overall state of AI. Since she's at NVIDIA, they talked a lot about scaling laws and the future of AI. I think Jonathan Siddharth, the CEO of Turing, who was interviewing her, was just great at asking fun questions, as was the audience. I would say the last question there was kind of perfect. So she focuses on small language models. And the question was, wouldn't your research cause NVIDIA to lose a lot of market cap? And in fact, she had emailed her research to Jensen Huang before joining. And he was like, yeah, that's great. And I think
he doesn't care.
Yeah.
It's ruling the world right now.
Well, no, but actually the implication is that if you have smaller language models, you can do more. You can have them run on phones. And so you actually could end up using more compute to power more and more small language models to do more. So
yeah, I would say though, so also at NeurIPS, the OpenRouter team released their state of AI survey based on OpenRouter, and they had this very interesting chart on the adoption of small versus medium versus large language models. So the cutoff was small was less than 15 billion, medium was 15 to 70, and large is anything above 70. And you could see the market share of small models trending down over time in practice.
Really?
And the market share of medium trending up, and then large is staying the same. Yeah, and this is open models only, of course. And obviously the closed models have gone up and up and up. So I don't. It's just a data point.
Yeah.
I think it was one of those things where, like, Apple Intelligence, I think it's widely acknowledged to be a failure this year. And they were kind of the champions of the small models on-device movements that really needed to work, and it did not work. Gemini launched Gemini Nano in Chrome this year. I haven't used it. I don't know if you use it. Yeah, basically, like, the small model hope and dream, I think it's still in, like, very small use cases and not rolled out. And I don't know what needs to happen for it to roll out.
Yeah, I would say that makes a lot of sense for general purpose model. I think for other component models, like, let's say, like for a re-ranker, due to latency constraints,
Of course,
smaller is better, is what I've heard from other developers, but I can see that being a trend more generally.
Yeah, you guys had a lot of re-ranker work last year. I don't know, is that, like, as much of a focus this year for Contextual?
We released the first instruction following re-ranker in March.
Okay.
And we updated it recently. So it's something that I think we'll keep digging to keep up with the state of the art, because it is really a key function within context engineering. So, for example, when you're reasoning over larger and larger databases, you want to be able to have more recall in those initial retrievals, but you want more precision for what you're actually putting into the context window for fear of context rot and, poor performance. And so that re-ranker can really help you narrow down that initial retrieval.
I did a brief comment that it's weird that was the first instruction following re-ranker, because, well, don't you always want it to be instruction following? And the simple answer from that I've had, I've literally asked the search firms this, the startups, like, those people who know will know, and they're all like, well, to be instruction following, you have to have a larger model, and that affects our latency budget. And I'm like, I don't think that's the case. Like, like latency for smaller models are pretty good these days. I don't know.
Yeah. So actually, that is, like, the biggest complaint I've heard from developers about our re-ranker.
Okay.
The latency.
Yeah.
But what we're using it for increasingly is for dynamic agents. And there
so that's insensitive, right?
Yeah.
Just take however long you want to take. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's fair. I'll get right to context engineering. I think the other thing that there was a big topic of conversation this year was, quote unquote, the death of normal RAG and the rise of agentic RAG. Do you agree? Is the debate itself overrated? Because obviously you use whatever in the right context, right? Like, it depends. I don't know. Is this a meaningful debate?
I mean, I think the debate is not so meaningful. I think, like, progress is meaningful. But I think, to me, It's also like maybe somewhat a decided debate, like agentic RAG is just generally better than RAG. Even that initial incremental step of making that, doing query reformulation. So when you receive that initial query, being able to break it down into subqueries so that you can better match those queries to documents that you might want to retrieve and then combine that for the retrieval, even that step improves performance so dramatically that, that's kind of, that became the new baseline.
Yeah, that is obviously so helpful, and you can farm it out and parallelize and then regroup it. So this year, the work that I did on SweetGrep did that. Like, so we had like a fast context model where it was trained. I think a couple innovations I think was really interesting. One, trained for massively or much more parallel than normal tool calling for searching. So you can sort of normal parallelism is like 1 to 2, maybe maximum 4. We train the baseline to be 6 parallel searches at a time and goes up to 8. And then also limited agency, that you don't want your agentic search to run forever. You do want it to terminate at some point and return the answer. So incentivizing the RL to do that, I think, was helpful, easy, and actually scaled very well.
Yes. And actually, we have found that having turn limits and limits on the subagents checking and validating their work is super important. We recently did, myself and a member of my team recently participated in a context engineering hackathon.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, so Brian Bischoff and Hamil Hussein hosted it in San Francisco last month, mid-November. And they had about just under 100,000 documents, so PDFs, all in the retail space. So it's called Retail Universe. And they had log files, tables, giant CSVs, Parquet files. And we used our dynamic agent to answer really challenging queries in this and generate structured output. And some of the very early steps we noticed is, with a data set that large, that agent will want to take that subagent, let's say the unstructured retrieval or structured retrieval subagent, will want to take so many turns to make sure they've, looked under every rock in the data set. I mean, we actually don't want that. That data set is pretty large. And then also it turns out the subagent will want to check its work over and over and over. So that's kind of like something that we noticed with large scale. And so kind of similar to what you found, like you don't want unlimited, whether you're enforcing that within like the RL reward structure or with explicit instructions in the system prompt.
Yeah, I would say very much this year is kind of the year of the subagent for me, in terms of like the people are using constrained agents to do very specific things. And sometimes being too general actually is like an anti-pattern, because, well, it doesn't go very far on its own, or it's not very reliable, or it doesn't have the tools that it needs, or blah, 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 right? And subagents make sense. And, also, like, you also happen to be able to fine-tune a model towards that specific task. So you can also hill climb very easily as well. And so I think, to me, that is like all the right elements of AI engineering that I want to see people do more of, and people just needed a term for it. And I guess I think people have settled on subagents as a term. Just briefly staying on the hackathon, are there any other alternative approaches that you found interesting that you want to shout out?
I actually have a blog I'll write soon about our experience.
Mouth blog it. I love it.
And so I think the leading team was using Mixspread and Claude. Second place was using Cursor.
Mixspread.
Yeah.
I've seen that a couple times.
Yeah, I think they also have a re-ranker and some other open source models.
Okay. Interesting name.
Yeah. And I forget what the other team was. And there was also a human doing the challenge. And so there was a human benchmark.
Oh, yeah. How did human do?
I think they got 23 points. We got, I think, about 25, and the winner had about 29. So it was like very
Okay, it's
close.
superhuman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so let's get right into the meat, which is context engineering. This very, very big year for context engineering. Your company is Contextual, which like could not be more on the nose. How do you describe this year in context engineering?
It's been a very fast year because context engineering really took hold 6 months ago, and that actually feels like a year. And so I think one thing that stands out to me is that there are a lot of design patterns that are kind of bubbling up, but there isn't like a uniform design that folks are using as the architecture. And I think there's a lot of optimization and efficiencies to gain. So I think with a lot of new development, you kind of start by, letting the agent use as many tokens as it wants. And then later you figure out how to constrain that and how to optimize it, let's say like with key value caching or other approaches that can help really scale the technology. So I think it's kind of, to me, maybe more in a prototyping stage. And I'm expecting next year we'll really see scale for context engineering.
What does scale look like? What will we be able to do end of next year that we cannot do this year, or that we're not doing this year?
I think the kinds of tasks that we'll be able to solve are going to increase. So I think, for example, we're already seeing the start of that. There was in the how benchmarks, there was one about...
Is this the Chroma piece?
No, this is from Princeton.
Okay. No, then I'm not familiar with it.
How, I forget now what it stands for, but it's a set of benchmarks for really evaluating longer running agentic tasks. And in this case, there was one where they were recreating a research paper. And that benchmark came out in October, and it was saturated earlier this week by Claude Code.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So, and in fact, they needed to have humans do the evaluation because the solution was like somewhat like maybe a different approach than a human would take, somewhat superhuman. You know, the common pattern you see now where actually like the gold data set has some errors in it, and so the model
Love it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because
because if it gets 100, then you're like, oh, well, there's something's wrong. Like it's a canary for well, something's actually wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should do it on purpose.
Yeah, and I think we'll just see these benchmarks, these new, really well thought out and really challenging benchmarks come out and then very quickly be saturated.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to see that, I think, for more and more challenging tasks.
Do you find in like just general DevRel work in marketing and just like leadership of a category, like, do you find it useful to maintain a benchmark or like to have like, oh, this is the contextual benchmark that everyone should adopt? I struggle with this because obviously a lot of benchmarks come from research and not industry, but I feel like industry should have a role.
Yeah, actually, I mean, we've been using that data set from the hackathon I described earlier to benchmark somewhat. I think it's a really interesting data set because most benchmarks use a very small set of data to train or to inference about. And this actually requires reasoning over.
Yeah, this will never fit in a context window, right?
Yes.
So
yeah. So I think...
You know how many tokens it is? Or you said it's 100,000 documents.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many tokens that translates to.
Oh.
I'd say like about 1,000 each, 4,000 each.
Probably more.
Probably more. Okay. So that's many billions.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yes. So I think I would love to see benchmarks. I would love to see more industry benchmarks because those would help us actually evaluate at the scale and not have a toy example as, many benchmarks are.
Yeah, amazing. And, just like the lore of context engineering, obviously we got a shout out to Dex, who did a couple great talks this year, maybe 3. I think also Drew Bernig also written a lot about the failure modes of context engineering. What's sticking with the people that you talk to, right? Like context rot it's a well-established term. Shout out to Chroma. Anything else? Context poisoning, I haven't heard as much. Right? So that term is not sticking. What else is like the topic of conversation that everyone should know?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see context rot cited in every blog about...
Yeah, and I always call it my L on that. Like I told Jeff, I was like, are you sure this needs to be written? Because everyone knows this. And he's like, no, everyone doesn't know this.
Well, exactly.
It was like obvious to us, but
yes. Yes, I think it's very intuitive, but I think actually having the metrics and results to show
for... Yeah, he did the work.
Yes, exactly.
He did the work.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have intuitions just based on using a model, but actually if you can put a model put a number saying like, well, okay, of this 1 million token context at 700,000 tokens, your retrieval is actually like 30%.
Exactly. Yeah. So now you can compare it to other performance gaps and kind of see what's having a bigger impact. I think Anthropic has had some really great blogs in this space. I would say there's one on some design and architecture choices that they put out that was really interesting fairly early. I would say, it didn't come out this year, but I think MCP has been a huge driver of context engineering.
Driver and also a flaw, I would say as well. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Because MCP is this giant JSON thing up front. You're stuffing in the descriptors of all the tools. And so it's very quickly, you get into straight up context rot when you have like 10 tools, especially if the tools are fat.
Yeah, so there's been some really interesting work on some really interesting blogs on tool use. Manus had one that was kind of more general, but had some best practices around tools. And Anthropic has written more on tool use patterns. So
Cloudflare.
Yeah.
That's the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually, funny enough, going back to our re-ranker, I actually set up just a prototype of selecting which MCP servers to use. Being able to select those servers is already like a context challenge because there's so many of them.
It's a subagent.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is that something people are very excited about? They're deploying at scale. You see a lot of traction.
I think similarly, so I think, yes, we've definitely seen a lot of great use for it. We have our dynamic agent use MCP servers as well. And I think earlier in the year, I made some really fun demos, being able to just really quickly combine tools for a prototype.
Yeah.
So I think it's really helped people prototype faster and show value in an early version to then kind of build out in larger scale. And I think for us, for me personally, like in my dynamic agent configs, I'm moving more toward API calls and something a little bit more. Once I've kind of maybe been able to prototype with an MCP server and figure out how I'm going to use this, I think then you can can reduce the complexity.
Yeah.
And reduce that dependency.
Yeah. Mentioning MCP, I don't know how far you want to go into this, but the MCP gateway finally launched from Anthropic. There's a bunch of MCP sort of services that are doing various sort of discovery and being a registry. What should people know? What are people betting on? What's actually working?
In terms of MCP servers or directories?
Yeah, directories, gateway, auth, anything of that nature. Basically, like everything that happened after the initial launch of MCP.
Yeah.
Like there's been a bunch of work. There's MCP UI, but I don't know if that's really strictly context engineering. So
yeah, we added our MCP server to the registry, and it really seemed like
the official Anthropic one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it really seemed like that registry is meant to be read by agents, not humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like a GitHub repo.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting because I think, yes, there's definitely value to having strong agent experience. And I think that's going to be an area that's going to be growing over the next year for sure, is being able to let agents just like do things without a human in the loop. But I do think for MCP servers, I think you kind of still want a human to make that selection of what you're going to include in your list of tools. You want to check, the security and other things before you would let it run.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so more broadly, I guess any other things you call out in like the state of engineering, any so context engineering, any other good work by other companies? You shut out Manus briefly.
Yeah, I think there's been some really interesting research, let's say, in optimizing the system prompt.
Okay.
So
this is the continual prompt learning from Arise, or
no, I'm thinking
Jeppa.
Jeppa.
I think people are very excited about Jeppa. The way that I explain it, you can feel free to correct me, is it's kind of like an evolution of the original DSPy idea, where you set objectives and let LLMs optimize their own prompts by looking at output and thinking about and reasoning about like what should they continue to add in the prompts to improve their evals. So it's like a nice like sort of PyTorch-like model of a training loop, but it's only in the prompts, not in the weights.
Mm-hmm.
You can also obviously extend it to the weights. And I think the other thing about why it's called Jeppa, there's an evolutionary element or genetic evolutionary element where you roll out multiple samples and you select the best survivors from that. Anything else I missed?
No, that captures it really well and actually jogged my memory of ACE.
Yeah.
So actually, agentic context engineering, that approach actually has shown better benchmark performance on financial and other complex document sets. And the approach they've taken is quite interesting. So basically, if you take an approach like Jeppa and you basically like maybe throw out the whole prompt and start over, or you do like many, many steps and you kind of like compress and expand and compress and expand, you're kind of going to lose some information and you can see a significant drop off in performance. And so they're using this agentic approach to just make smaller tweaks in the current prompt rather than rewriting from scratch.
Yeah.
That's among their innovations for that approach that I think is actually kind of goes along with what Seth said about the KV cache and really like, I think agents can get pretty confused pretty quickly and that can really degrade performance and cause hallucinations. And so I think wherever you can, like, one, use the KV cache for both efficiency, but also for some sort of like more stable environment for the agent to be able to take, more and more actions in.
Yeah. How much KV cache decision making is there for context engineering? I feel like obviously the answer is the stuff that doesn't change, put it up front, and the stuff that does change a lot, put it at the bottom, right? I don't care, and I think that's mostly because most agents that I care about are multi-turn, and so the cache is the whole turn, the 5 turns that happened before, and I'm not changing the system prompt that much, right? So KV cache you save money if you're serving the same prompt to 1,000 customers, right? I guess that's it. But we don't do that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it can also improve performance, but I think as conversations take more and more turns, I haven't really seen a system that handles this well. Like for Cursor, I get to a certain point in the conversation, I'm opening a new window, even if I wasn't done with that conversation,
Yeah.
because the context bloats and you.
Yeah. So Dex would call this like intentional context compression, intentional frequent context compression, because like you don't trust the model to do compaction just yet. I would say that both Anthropic and I think OpenAI and maybe Gemini as well, they're all doing like compaction inside the model with each of their frontier releases. I don't know if that's interesting to you or yeah. Any evals on it?
Well, actually, I did what I like to call an embodied eval of ChatGPT last winter. I used it as a training coach for a snowboarding mogul race.
What is a mogul race? You snowboard around moguls?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a double diamond mogul run, and you lap 25 times. And
25? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's about 40,000 vertical feet. Actually, 23. So, right, I mean, training is very important to be able to do this and to do it safely.
It's also a workout. I don't know how calories you burn on that.
A lot. They give you a big pasta dinner at the end. And so this was a really long-term project. It was like 3-4 months, and also it required me taking action in the real world in an embodied way, and then having that loop. And I just had to like close that window and like restart, and then I lost a lot of training info. So I think like that's kind of made me, I think, proactively limit the number of turns. So maybe I'm missing some of the progress that's happened since then. This season, I'm evaluating multiple models to see who is the best coach.
Yeah, but then you have to like copy paste, do data entry on all these models, right? That's not great. Unless you have your own custom interface, or are you just going to chatgpt.com, Claude.ai?
I think I'm going to do like initial interviews on Ella Marina.
Okay, I see.
And then kind of maybe pick one or two.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, cool. Automated context engineering is really great. Any specifically for code, I guess? I don't know how much you guys encounter code. It sounds like yes. And is it very different than like legal and retail and support, all these other domains?
Yeah, so our goal has been to create a platform that's really end-to-end and easy to get up and running for any domain and any use case. And I think we saw that firsthand with kind of a recent beta at that hackathon I mentioned for e-commerce, although we do have customers in that domain, but I haven't really interacted with that work very much. And so code has been one of the domains we've worked with as well. And so we actually just used our platform for test code generation for devices. And what we found is kind of the same approach we take, where we have multimodal ingestion and an ability to get the hierarchy of the document contents, and then retrieval pipeline that includes, filters, re-rankers, hybrid search. All of that combined is a really great starting point. And then we're able to hill climb very quickly, and actually had state-of-the-art, or I guess the highest human-based evals for that customer compared to coding platforms. So I think it's really, it requires a bit of customization, but I think context engineering applies to code the same way that it applies to other domains.
Yeah. Awesome. A little bit of prediction corner here. What do you think is underrated now in context engineering that will be a big topic conversation next year? Like basically what's underrated, right? Like what should people talk about more, but they're not?
I think really the full system. So I think right now what people are talking about are innovations in one part of the system or another, like let's say different components, like a memory system or a re-ranker or design patterns around compressing context, things like that. And I think in the next year we'll have full systems that can be kind of a design pattern rather than having a discussion at that level rather than components.
Yeah, amazing. This is your 5th NeurIPS. I would say for people who've been long timers, I think the last time that NeurIPS was in San Diego was the Florida NeurIPS. I don't know if you were there for that.
Which year was that?
It's like 2017 or something. Yeah. How did you reflect on the scene changing when you come back?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So my first NeurIPS was in 2016 in Barcelona. So
That's nice.
yeah. So I was I had just finished my graduate research in neuroscience in reward learning and decision making. I was doing a postdoc at Berkeley, but I had a poster from my graduate work. So I flew out for a few days, and it was really not what I expected from a research conference, having mostly attended neuroscience research conferences.
Oh yeah, how's it different?
A
'Cause this is neural information processing.
I know. So I've run into so many neuroscientists here as well, and people I know from that earlier career stage. I was not expecting all the industry parties. That's just not a thing in neuroscience.
Yeah.
And it was just such a smaller, it seemed like a large conference, and everyone there was like, oh yeah, it used to be much
Quieter, smaller.
smaller. And I think now I'm just like, there's so many people, it's their first year, and I'm just like not seeing some of the same folks I ran into in the earlier years.
They're still around. You just have to find them in parties and like places like Law Lounge. Very cool. Any calls to action? How can people help you, find you, anything like that?
Yeah, we have some really exciting updates coming in the domain of context engineering. So, follow me, Nina Lopatina, on Twitter or LinkedIn or Contextual AI, and just
Stay tuned.
stay tuned.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.